Here's how a world record-breaking whiskey sold for half its supposed value. Macallan. It's arguably the height of Scotch whiskey, a brand that many aspire to, whether it be in cask or bottle form. Unfortunately though, buying a cask of Macallan is like finding the Holy Grail for most of us. It's just not going to happen. I've worked in the whiskey industry for nearly a decade now, and whilst I've seen my fair share of Macallan casks on the market, it wasn't until last year that I finally managed to complete my first Macallan deal. And you'd probably think that it was a triumphant moment for us here at the Whiskey Baron, but unfortunately it was nothing short of a nightmare. As you can imagine, purchasing a cask from one of Scotland's most famous and highly revered distilleries comes at a price. The world record for the most expensive cask of Macallan sold at auction is currently held by Whisky Hammer, with a winning bid of £915,500, plus 10% fees. This cask sold in 2022 and understandably created a huge amount of hype, both around the brand itself and the cask market at large. Including commissions, it equated to a value of £5,217 per litre, or £158.12 per litre per year. No small amount of money, but if you have £1 million to spend on a whiskey cask and Macallan is your thing, then crack away. The cask I dealt with was originally offered out at a value extremely close to this record breaker, at £157.40 per litre per year, and it was part of a fire sale. Unfortunately, the owner, who had a significant cask collection, was liquidating their portfolio due to financial necessity. It was listed as a sherry hogshead, but upon receiving the sample, something seemed off to me. Sure, it was definitely a Macallan, and to be honest, it was rather tasty, but was it a sherry hogshead? It seemed too light in both colour and flavour. I checked with the seller and with the warehouse where it was stored, and was assured that the paperwork had it listed as a sherry hogshead. I had an interested buyer, but it all came down to getting the price right. So, with some serious negotiation over the course of 2 weeks, we ended up agreeing on a value a little over £107 per litre per year. And to me, this made much more sense, as I've always seen Macallan to be a £100 per litre per year brand. Still, we're talking over £200,000 here, and so as you can imagine, I wanted to ensure that everything was kosher. I invoiced my customer, but held off on forwarding funds and decided to visit the bond where the cask was stored to check things out myself. I spoke with the warehouse owner, as well as individuals who worked on the warehouse floor and dealt with these sorts of casks all the time. And having spent about 30 minutes looking not only at the cask in question, but also at other Macallan casks from a similar vintage, it became very clear that this wasn't a sherry hogshead at all. The cask rings were in the wrong position, the cask end was the wrong colour, and above all, the liquid itself seemed to be bourbon matured. When I asked why it was listed as a sherry hogshead, I was told that a previous owner had requested this detail to be added. It had originally been listed simply as a hogshead, with no specification as to whether it was sherry or bourbon matured. Now, call me a stickler, but if I'm spending between £200,000 and £1 million on a cask of whiskey, I'd want to be sure that all of the pertinent details are correct. Wouldn't you? And yet, here I was, being told that the provenance of the wood was not something that the warehouse was responsible for, and ultimately, it was up to the owner of the cask to provide this information. As you can imagine, this caused some serious waves with my buyer, and equally, the seller was not at all happy to hear the news. They had been sold the cask as a sherry hogshead, and so the idea that this had all of a sudden been proven to be incorrect was both shocking and understandably more than frustrating. Due to financial circumstances, the seller was left in a difficult position and begrudgingly accepted a final offer less than £90 per litre per year. And whilst my buyer was happy, I didn't feel good watching someone find out that they had been missold before then having to accept an offer significantly lower than their buy price. And yet, what could I do? My responsibility was to ensure that all details of the sale were accurate, and I wasn't about to become a part of the problem by mis-selling the cask once again. So, where does the responsibility lie? Ultimately, there are over 22 million casks maturing in Scotland, and whilst cask provenance is all the rage now, it wouldn't have been before the turn of the century. Most casks from the 90s or before will be listed simply as a hogshead or a butt, with no further information attached. And yet, with some digging and a keen eye, it's relatively easy to see the wood from the trees, providing, of course, you know what you're looking for. So, what's the moral of the story? Well, whiskey casks are an esoteric asset that can easily be missold by unscrupulous individuals who know how to manipulate key information. And the crazy thing about this situation is that I wouldn't have even known myself had I not driven to see the cask before making the purchase. So ask yourself, do you have someone that truly cares, like the Whiskey Baron, on your side with feet on the ground in Scotland to ensure that what you're buying is legitimate? Or are you dealing with a broker who has little interest in the cask past the point of selling it to you? Please remain cautious when it comes to buying and selling whiskey casks, and always seek advice or insight from multiple sources before making any decisions. This is just one example we've chosen to highlight, but unfortunately, similar issues are becoming commonplace in the market, and even those posing as regulators of the industry are often untrustworthy.